Thanksgiving Day, 1968. Somewhere across the Cambodian border, in country where no American soldier was supposed to be standing, 6 men were running for their lives. Behind them, North Vietnamese soldiers in pith helmets were pouring out of the tree line from 2 directions at once. Ahead of them was a landing zone and the faint, far-off hope of a helicopter. And the men chasing them belonged to a force that American intelligence had, just days earlier, completely lost track of. 3 full divisions, roughly 30,000 men, part of a much larger force estimated at 100,000, massing in the supposedly neutral country next door. The fear was simple and serious, that they were regrouping for another lunge at Saigon. Someone had to go find them. That someone was St. Idaho. MACV-SOG, the Military Assistance Command Vietnam Studies and Observations Group, was the unit handed missions like this one. The bland bureaucratic name was deliberate cover for one of the most secretive organizations of the war. SOG ran cross-border reconnaissance and sabotage into Laos, Cambodia, and North Vietnam itself, places where Washington insisted no American boots were on the ground. Its small teams hunted the Ho Chi Minh Trail, the sprawling supply network feeding the war in the South, and they paid for it. SOG's missions carried casualty rates so high they are difficult to comprehend, the kind of numbers where being wounded, often more than once, was simply expected. The men who joined knew the arithmetic going in. The operation began, of always, with Turkey. As St. Idaho waited at the launch site at Bo Dop, a helicopter touched down carrying a full Thanksgiving feast. Hot turkey, gravy, mashed potatoes, cranberry roll. The men ate well, perhaps too well, and as they were finishing, Air Force helicopters arrived to carry them into Cambodia. The insertion was fast and low, the aircraft skimming the treetops at full speed. Meyer would later say he was close enough to the canopy that he worried about branches catching his feet. Then came the rules, and the rules were what made this mission so dangerous. Inside Cambodia, the restrictions were tighter than anything the team faced in their usual operating areas. They were permitted to go only about 10 kilometers in, and critically, if they were attacked, they were forbidden from calling in the fixed-wing aircraft, the bombers and strike planes that had kept SOG teams alive when surrounded elsewhere. In Laos, that lifeline was cut by policy made far from the jungle. The terrain made it worse. This was not the dense double canopy of Laos that hid a team from view. Meyer compared it to the thinly wooded countryside of central New Jersey, where he'd hunted as a younger man, open enough that you could see sunlight, see straight through the trees for more than 100 yards, which meant that anything out there could see you too.
The unease started early. During a halt, with the vegetation thinner than he liked, Meyer had his point man and Bubba rigged 2 Claymore mines with 5-second fuses, improvised insurance against a place that felt wrong. Then Sao, Meyer's counterpart among the mercenaries, spotted smoke and the team moved toward it. Sao read the ground and said there were no Viet Cong nearby, and, as always, his read was correct. They walked into an enemy bivouac, the smoke rising from a dying fire. It was an encampment, and it was empty. No one challenged them. Meyer began taking photographs, and the team started doing what Recon teams did, searching for documents, maps, anything their intelligence shops back home could use. But Sao was getting nervous. His eyes were growing wider, his speech faster. Hape, the interpreter, picked up the nervousness just from talking to him. Sao was quick and fearless, and he had a sense for the NVA that bordered on instinct. Meyer wanted to push further west to look for a weapons cache. Sao didn't wait for the translation. He looked at Meyer and said it plainly, "Call the helicopters now. Boku NVA, coming now." Meyer couldn't hear anything, he couldn't see anything, but he had learned to trust the men who could, and Hape explained what Sao had found, hundreds of fresh footprints leading off to the south. The empty camp wasn't abandoned, it had just been stepped out of, and its occupants were close. What happened next happened fast. Meyer signaled the team to turn back toward the landing zone. As they moved, Sao backpedaled behind them, hastily brushing out their tracks. They had gone only a short distance when Sao hissed the warning again, and Meyer saw them. Pith helmets coming up from the south. He got on the radio to the command helicopter circling out of earshot and called for it to come back with Cobra gunships and to pick them up at the primary LZ as fast as possible. The answer came back, 10 minutes. 10 minutes, in the open, with no bombers allowed, against a force pouring out of the trees. Meyer fired his M79 grenade launcher twice toward the oncoming NVA, 2 high bursts that bought a few seconds of hesitation. Then Sao pointed north, and there were pith helmets there, too, running straight at them. Meyer understood the geometry of the trap in an instant. The troops from the south were the division that had left the base camp. The ones from the north were moving in to occupy it. St. Idaho had walked into the seam between them, and now both halves were closing. So the team did the only thing 6 men can do against numbers like that. They ran, and they made the enemy pay for every step. Sao and Meyer planted the first claymore behind a tree and sprinted. The NVA kept charging, and the mine blew behind them. Sao set another, this one in front of a tree, and they ran again, feeling the backblast as it detonated. At the LZ, Hape set another claymore facing the charging troops. To the north, Bubba rigged one with a contact detonator on a tripwire. As the wave of pith helmets surged toward them, Bubba and Meyer worked their grenade launchers, while Sao and Hape opened up on full automatic. NVA soldiers emerging from the smoke tripped Bubba's wire and set off the blast. It was a fighting retreat measured in seconds and meters, each mine and each burst of fire buying just enough time for the next one. This is the part where the title and the truth meet, and it's worth being honest about. 6 men did not defeat 30,000. No one stood and traded volleys with 3 divisions. What St. Idaho actually did was harder to dramatize, but far more remarkable. They stumbled into the heart of a massing enemy force, recognized the trap a heartbeat before it closed, and fought a disciplined, terrified, brilliantly improvised withdrawal that kept them alive long enough for help to arrive. That is what SOG Recon teams did. It was, in the words of those who studied the unit, more common than not for a team to be pulled out under fire with its perimeter seconds from being overrun. Help arrived at the last possible moment. As the team reached the landing zone and dug in, the North Vietnamese were nearly on top of them. Then the helicopters came, and they came shooting. The accounts describe Hueys from the Air Force's 20th Special Operations Squadron, the unit nicknamed the Green Hornets, sweeping in with door guns hammering. The rest of the team scrambled on board. Meyer fired his last claymore into a wave of NVA who had gotten in front of it, and the blast gave him the seconds he needed to reach the aircraft. As they lifted out of the LZ, soldiers burst from the woods, startled by the choppers. One tried to stop and bring his AK up, and Meyer and the door gunner cut him down as the helicopter clawed into the sky. They landed back at Bo Dope at 2 in the afternoon. The Air Force pilots, who had no idea what the team had just survived, invited them to Thanksgiving dinner. They were starving, and they accepted. Then a launch site soldier told them they had to get to FOB 6 immediately for debriefing. Meyer reported to his commanding officer, who wanted only a thumbnail sketch to wire to Saigon so the rest of them could finally eat, which meant another turkey dinner waiting at the end of it. By Meyer's own laughing count, that made 3 Thanksgiving dinners and 1 mission in the same day. He and Bubba ate the 3rd meal. This time, he wrote, they passed on seconds, and they thanked God for the U.S. Air Force.
The mission accomplished exactly what it had been sent to do. St. Idaho had found the missing divisions, confirmed they were there, in strength, exactly where the fear said they would be, and lived to report it. No medals, no headlines, no public record at the time. The men had signed secrecy agreements that would keep stories like this one buried for decades. That was the bargain of SOG. The work was some of the most dangerous of the entire war, and almost none of it could ever be spoken of. The men who came home carried it quietly, and many of the men who did this kind of work did not come home at all. Years later, the survivors began to write it down, and accounts like Meyer's are why we can tell this story now at all. 6 men, 30,000, a Thanksgiving feast at both ends of the worst day of running of their lives, and a thin green line of Hueys that showed up guns blazing, right on time.